In this video, we're going to cover how to prepare your brand for selling on Amazon during the holiday season and what you can do right now to be ready. So it's never too early to start thinking about the holiday selling season on Amazon. And this applies to your brand even if you're not a giftable type item. Maybe you have an item like a cosmetics brand and someone's necessarily not going to purchase your product to give as a gift. The thing you gotta remember is that the customer traffic on Amazon increases substantially during the holiday season. There are way more customers on the site, obviously looking for gifts for the holidays, but also maybe looking for something for themselves. So if they're there looking for something, there's a chance they may also find your brand when they're on the site buying a gift for their mother or their friend or their partner, whoever it may be. So you've got to keep that in mind, and not just for, this doesn't just apply to items that are given as gifts. Always want to look back and think about what happened in years past. The last couple of years with the pandemic have been crazy. It's affected e-commerce in a lot of different ways. Huge increases in sales in the last couple of years, but also a lot of increases in some of the issues that come along with that in terms of like logistics, stocking inventory in FBA, and things like that. Looking at some of those years past, maybe even taking a few moments to reflect on that and just jotting down some notes of, hey, what were the big things that happened last year? What were the issues we ran into? Just so you can start to get the mindset of what I need to kind of look for this year and prepare for. You know, as you're doing that, looking at things like what happened with inventory. Where do we have enough inventory? Where was it at? Was it at FBA? Was it somewhere else? Was it stuck in between? What do we do with our pricing? Do we have everyday pricing and keep our pricing the same all along? Did we increase pricing as the holiday selling season went along? And also advertising. Again, just like anything, it's very easy to spend or waste money on advertising on Amazon, but looking back at even some of your metrics on ACoS, ROAS, spend, things like that, painting a picture, so to speak, of what happened last year and even the years past. And then thinking about what happened after the holiday selling season. Did some of that growth last year maybe contribute to higher sales in January and February and March? Did you catapult that? Were there other learnings that you came up with from there? There's a lot to take in, a lot to think about when it comes to that. And we're going to delve down in a couple of these topics a little further so you can think about how you can maximize this upcoming holiday season. So you want to take all those learnings from previous years and you want to put those into a digest and really think about those. And then again, some of the things we're going to talk about today kind of frame the experience from previous years and frame that with some kind of ideas and thoughts from today. All right, so let's talk about inventory, right? That's one of the biggest constraints. It's definitely been one of the biggest constraints the last couple of years in terms of the pandemic and supply chain, getting raw materials and all the delays and lead times and manufacturing and logistics and all that. Let's break that down. What does that mean? So number one, do you have enough inventory? You may have already planned and actually produced all your items for the holiday selling season, and if so, you're probably ahead of that curve. You may be able to start thinking about that of when do I need to put production schedules in place to have inventory ready to ship and have enough lead time to get to Amazon. Keep in mind, it takes longer to get to Amazon, obviously, during the holiday selling season. It also depends on carriers and weather and all different aspects, but just make sure you're allowing for extra time to get product from your source of inventory into Amazon's warehouse if you're utilizing FBA. And if you are utilizing FBA, just keep in mind if you're using that same stock you have at Amazon, or maybe some other programs like you're fulfilling other channels with inventory using multi-channel fulfillment, maybe you're using remote FBA and you're using some of that stock to fulfill orders from the Canada or Mexico marketplaces. Make sure you keep that in mind. That will affect obviously your overall metrics and sell-through, and you're taking that into account as well. One of the biggest things that really affected sellers in the last couple of years are these restock limits that Amazon put on an account level. So previously it was on a product level or an ASIN level where you couldn't send so many products in, how much you could send in on a product based on how quickly it was selling. And that was on a product level several years ago before the pandemic. Then Amazon came up with this kind of account level restock limit, right? Where essentially an entire account is restricted from sending in new inventory based on how much overall is selling. So it really affected sellers that have a wide SKU catalog and lots of SKUs they need to stock and keep in stock, as opposed to maybe a brand that only has one or two products. That affected sellers a lot in the last couple of years, and it really affected how much they could send in and when they could send it in, right? Because you actually couldn't create the shipment in Amazon systems until that had been done. So keep that in mind as well. Watching those restock limits, we've seen it get much better since the last holiday season ended. We're expecting it to be okay for most of our clients this year. Keep in mind also Also for inventory, if you run out of stock at FBA, can you use your stock at your 3PL at your warehouse as a backup to fulfill orders fulfilled by merchant or FBM, right? Keep in mind you got Amazon's time frames and rules and regulations that come along with that. Make sure you're adhering to those. But just another point to think about, if you don't have stock at FBA, instead of turning that off, can you just fulfill orders internally yourself? A couple things to keep in mind when it comes to pricing. First off, one of the biggest words of the year is inflation, and brands are already seeing that obviously in the maybe raw materials and other costs they have in terms of producing their products. They're already seeing those go way up. And obviously that has to be passed along to consumers because as a business, you still have to make money. Obviously, you will have to make sure, number one, that you understand your margins. We've already kind of talked about that in some other videos, and using, some of the, even the tools on Seller Central to understand how much is Amazon taking, getting. Keep in mind that during the holiday selling season, Amazon does increase their storage fee. So don't want to send a ton of stock in if you're not going to be selling it during this time, because Amazon increases that monthly storage fee for all the units. Also, you want to think about demand pricing. So as your items are selling, do you want to keep increasing price as you get closer to that holiday deadline of, let's say, Christmas, or the cutoff shipping to Christmas? So if there's an opportunity to increase your price those last couple weeks of the holiday selling season, they don't really pay attention to price as much. They really want to get the item either to themselves or sent to another individual. So pricing doesn't matter as much. On the flip side of that, one thing to watch for this year, are we going to be going into a recession? Do we need to kind of plan for that? And what happens if selling is very soft this year? We notice coming into October, November, how do we play into that as well? Now, in terms of advertising, that's something you really want to keep a close eye on, like any day of the week. Now, we talk about that a lot. We talk about advertising, how easy it is to spend money in advertising and waste money if you're not doing it efficiently and effectively. So with advertising, you want to make sure your campaigns are very optimized. You're not starting a bunch of new campaigns and new learnings during this time frame, because your results can be kind of skewed. But you're really taking those winnings, making sure you're maybe running some kind of software as well that's optimizing your bid amounts to be in line with your targets and your goals. But also, one thing to think about is if you have 3 weeks away from the deadline of the shipping cutoff deadline before Christmas, you've only got 2 weeks of inventory and you've been advertising, something to think about is just turning off advertising or limiting it very drastically, because you're going to run out of stock anyway. There's no point in paying for those sales if you're going to get the sales anyway organically. Now, keep that in mind. You make sure you watch it very closely, because that can change very quickly. All of a sudden, your days of inventory, you could go into January if you're not watching it closely. So just make sure you may need to turn it back on for a few days, turn it off again. Definitely that would maximize your overall revenue and margins really for the holiday season, because you wouldn't be paying for those costs of sales on advertising. My last point is post holidays, you want to make sure that you're building on these sales, right? So you had a big lift maybe in December, and how can you catapult this, right? So keeping some of those ad campaigns running or turning them back on, getting stock into FBA, keeping things replenished. It's one thing to run out of stock right after Christmas, but if it's a product that sells year round, get more stock in. Make sure you have a continual amount. Be shipping new product into Amazon in December for January and February, right? Another big thing we recommend brands do is just kind of keeping a log, journaling maybe what happened week before Thanksgiving, this, and this, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, this, and this, and just kind of writing that down somewhere so that next year you can have a place to refer to and take some of those winnings and best practices and develop even a better plan next year. So the past couple years have been crazy, obviously, with the pandemic. And this year, it's also another big unknown, because there's some new things coming into play in terms of inflation and things like that. So no one really knows what's going to happen this year, but just a couple things to watch out for. Amazon is constrained sometimes by physical space, but more recently, they've been constrained by, they have a lot of physical space now available now. They've been constrained by labor. So actually workers getting products off the trucks and getting checked into Amazon fulfillment centers and moving them around Amazon fulfillment centers. So that's a constraint to watch out for that, again, you don't have direct control of, but just keep your ear to the ground of hearing things. Also, those restock limits. So watching those, monitoring that very, very often, making sure you have enough room to send more products into Amazon. If you are limited in any way, making strategic decisions on what SKUs you're going to send in and what you're going to maybe wait on until the next replenishment. Overall logistics market of getting product into Amazon. So, what's happening in the shipping industry? What's happening in the trucking industry? Are there any other constraints to be watching for? Keeping an ear to the ground also when it comes to economic news. So again, some economists are maybe predicting we might be heading towards a recession towards the end of 2022. And again, how might that affect the holiday selling season? If people are losing jobs or are a little more timid about the economy, might not be willing to spend as much during the holiday selling season. And really, this goes to show you need to be ready for kind of anything. Anything can happen. We've seen that the last couple of years. And again, it's definitely showing this year as well that brands just need to be prepared. Okay, so how do you implement and make this successful in your company for your brand? Number one, just have a plan and don't be afraid to deviate from it. So have a general idea of what's going to happen every week or every couple weeks or every month, what it's going to look like in terms of production, getting inventory in Amazon, pricing, advertising, all this stuff. Just a general idea, right? It's better to have a rough sketch than just kind of going blindly and have no idea what's going to happen at all. But also not being afraid to deviate from that. If you get a piece of information comes in that's really valuable and changes your plan completely, or something happens externally that you can't control, making sure you're ready to deviate and adjust from that original plan you created, and that's okay. The second thing that helps kind of inform those changes and inform that plan is having metrics that you're paying attention to and watching on a continual basis. Obviously there's big ones, some of the revenue metrics and units ordered and maybe some of the advertising metrics that you're always watching, but paying really close attention. Again, I'm going to mention again restock limits and what that restock limit for your account is and how that's adjusting and changing from day to day or week to week, how it's affecting things. Also looking at days of inventory on some of these big selling SKUs you may have during the holiday selling season. How many days of inventory, when are we going to run out essentially of that product if we don't sell or produce anymore? Making sure that covering some of these metrics and maybe the plan or any deviation from the plan is just a part of your regular company communication. You're talking about these Amazon holiday updates during that time so the entire team and your team can be on board, understanding what's happening, where things are at. It just helps the overall communication for the holiday selling season. And that's going to set you apart from the competition, allow you to outsell and outperform them during this time.